Russia has taken over the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council, sparking furious reaction in Ukraine. Kyiv's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, called it a, quote, slap in the face for the international community. Ukraine had urged members to block the move, but the U.S. says there's no mechanism for doing so. The largely ceremonial role puts Moscow in charge of setting the Security Council's agenda. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned Russia's presidency as absurd. In his daily address, he said it shows the council is a bankrupt institution.
There is no form of terror Russia has not committed, and there's no reason to stop the reform of global institutions, in particular the UN Security Council. Reform is clearly overdue, so that a terrorist state or any other state that wants to be a terrorist state cannot disrupt peace. Terrorists must lose, must be held accountable for terror, and not prevail anywhere.
Meanwhile, on the front line, civilians who managed to survive constant bombings and assaults have been urged to evacuate. Let's take a look now at what people are going through in the city of Avdiivka, which has been left in ruins.
Driving through the battered streets in the eastern city of Avdiivka, police are looking for those who want to leave. For the last 4 months, this basement has been home to 73-year-old Helena. But she's decided it's time to go.
I couldn't take it anymore. Our house is destroyed, and I spent most of the time in the basement. Everyone is afraid. Everyone.
Local officials say the town has been almost completely destroyed in recent weeks.
The situation has changed in the past month. Since the beginning of March, Avdiivka has been under aircraft bombing and artillery fire. Since then, almost all buildings have been destroyed.
In nearby Shazif Yar, people working for the charity International Lions Club are trying to convince residents to move to safety. Volunteers say many are reluctant to go.
The biggest part of the job is convincing them. The evacuation is the easy part.
Back in Avdiivka, it's an emotional departure for Helena. A train to safety, but far away from the place she calls home.
For further analysis at developments on the ground, we are now joined by defense analyst Marina Miron. Marina, Russia doesn't seem to have made any significant gains on the front line and is continuing to suffer major losses. All eyes have been on Bakhmut and Avdiivka for months now. Does Russia have the ability to wage an effective, large-scale offensive on the ground?
Thanks for having me. Well, first of all, what we're seeing around Bakhmut and Avdiivka, we have to understand that the Ukrainian armed forces have occupied defensive positions there, especially when we're talking about Avdiivka. They created a fortress well prior to Russia's invasion last year. So it is very difficult for Russia because defense in this case is easier than taking Avdiivka. Also, given the fact that Russia has suffered some setbacks and had to recalibrate its entire approach. We also have to bear in mind that Russia had to mobilize, and these new recruits are probably not as good as the manpower that the Russians have lost. So there are all sorts of factors that need to be taken into account when assessing the situation. And obviously we know that the Ukrainians have been pouring a lot of resources and manpower to defend Bakhmut, and the situation is not decided as of yet. So we're seeing conflicting reports. We're seeing Wagner planting the flag very close to the Bakhmut city administration and attacking the Ukrainian flanks, like around Kromovе. So it's still not decided, and it remains to be seen whether the Ukrainian side can indeed defend those two places.
Ukraine has held on to Bakhmut even when most thought that the city was about to fall. How do you explain this resilience? Is it down to better equipment, better trained soldiers, better strategies?
I guess it's down to many factors, as I said before. It's also down to the morale and the political imperative to hold Bakhmut, because it's important for Zelensky to be able to show that his forces are capable of resisting Russia's advances on the one hand. On the other hand, it creates more credibility when it comes to weapons deliveries and ammunition deliveries. And of course, the Western coalition has been trying desperately to provide Ukraine with, let's say, artillery shells to create some sort of parity because of intensive artillery battles. On the other hand, from a military perspective, there is a lot to lose for Ukraine, despite what we have been hearing, because the fear is, and this is coming from the Ukrainian military, that the entire line of defense would collapse. So it is vital for Ukraine to hold the city. And also in the kind of the informational spectrum, the Ukrainians don't want Russia to be able to claim that victory, because it would be the first victory for the Russians after so many setbacks. So there are all sorts of important things which are combined in this one city that the Ukrainians are holding to.
Holding on to Bakhmut also bought time for Ukraine to prepare its spring offensive. In your opinion, and I'm sure you've certainly thought about this over the last few weeks, when and where is that most likely to happen?
Well, there are quite a few options for the Ukrainian forces, but that will depend what happens between now and end of April and beginning of May. As the Ukrainian defense minister stressed, the roads are not suitable right now because of the weather. Ukrainians have to wait when this rainy season and the muddy season stops to be able to conduct a counteroffensive. So the counteroffensive and the location of it will be dependent on factors such as logistics. It would be logical for the Ukrainian forces to conduct a counteroffensive into the direction of either Melitopol or Mariupol, so in Zaporizhia, which would essentially, if successful, cut off the Russian contingent in Crimea and completely destroys Russian logistics. So that would be one possible direction. The other possible direction would be to stay in Bakhmut and to try to regain the territory to push back. However, we don't know what is going to happen in Bakhmut. And as the Ukrainian side has stressed, they are preparing several directions.
Got it. That is Marina Miron, defense analyst. As always, thanks for your time and perspective.